Hi, this is Rod, and what you're about to watch is an interview I did with Sean, another Adept Play regular, about the game Rolemaster and the experiences we've had with it. And we'll talk a little bit about why I want to talk to him about this in the video. But just in case you're not familiar with what Rolemaster is, whoever might be watching this, it's basically some college friends who were playing D&D in the mid to late 70s made up their own, rules and different, more complex, more internally consistent as they saw it rules for playing D&D. And then they got together and created this company, Iron Crown Enterprises, to release the rules as products. And those products, I think, started coming out around 1980. And then Rolemaster, in the form that I knew of it, what's called the second edition, is came out in 1984. And traditionally, Rolemaster comes in these has these books, this arms law and claw law, the rules for combat, fighting with weapons or with claws and teeth and so on. And then you've got your character law and campaign law, which tells you how to create your character and how to create adventures in whatever world you want to create, how to create your world and then create adventures in it. And then spell law is the magical book with all of the many different spells you can cast, with cool, organized into different what spell lists, which are like different schools or categories of magic with cool names like Spirit Mastery and Lofty Bridge and Lesser Illusions. It's very just going through all of these spells and reading the descriptions was very imagination stimulating stuff for me when I was a teenager. And we'll talk a little about that in the video as well. But I guess for context, what it's really known for is having a lot of charts. Like the Arms Law, the second edition Arms Law has just charts for many different weapons and their individual interactions with the roll of the die when you attack someone, and the many different types of armor they could be wearing, like 5 different armor materials divided into 4 different levels of coverage for 20 total individual armor ratings. And this sort of thing, hope you might need to get your eyes checked if you flip through this book. It has a lot of little numbers and codes to cross reference with the infamous critical hit tables, where you got hit badly by a weapon and you get mutilated in some horribly entertaining way, I guess, depending on what you're entertained by. But this is basically the thing that the game is particularly well known for, and that's kind of a make or break. You either see this and get excited and think, oh, I want to roll on that table and see what happens when I hit someone with this thing, or you just look at it and you're like, get that away from me. So that's kind of what the broader, game cultural reputation of Rolemaster is in a large part based on. And, the character creation system is also kind of, for its time, it was kind of involved, I guess. It's hard to say because, I think not long after Rolemaster came out, just other games started coming out with incredibly, even more convoluted and involved character creation processes. And, so in a sense, this is almost nostalgically simple in a way. But so that's what the game is known for. The other thing we talk about is Iron Crown Enterprises also had a license to publish Middle Earth role-playing game set in J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle Earth world from the Lord of the Rings and so on. And this is actually kind of a simplified version of of Rolemaster, where all of the different weapon and armor interactions are on 2 pages instead of many, many, many pages. And so, once you see that, it's hard to make the argument for going back to the many, many pages, but who knows? There's some sort of siren call that those tables have. But I'll talk about that in the video too. But anyway, I don't want to go too long on this. That's sort of a basic orientation. What you need to know. This is 1984, and this version of Rolemaster that I have here also was 1984, and there's a later version we talk about with covers by Angus McBride. It's worth just looking at the art for those covers from 1989. I think they're really cool art by Angus McBride. But that's all, and I think I'll go ahead and cut to the conversation now. So again, I guess to get started, to recap what I had said before, I watched that seminar you did with Ron and some other players about probabilities, and you had mentioned Rolemaster and the how much you enjoyed playing it, and I was interested in that because I played Rolemaster a little bit in like late high school, early college, and it was sort of I don't remember much about it except that I kept making new characters for the game. Partly because maybe that was a little more enjoyable than actually playing the game, at least the experience we were having. It was like this college guys just screwing around, and we fought the monsters, and there might have been a story, but I don't remember much about it. What I do remember, the one thing about making all the characters, I think I made 3 or 4 of them, was that the game master was very insistent on using the existing the textual experience point system in 2nd edition Rolemaster, which I don't know if you know. It takes a very long time to actually go from 1st level to 2nd level in that system. And
yes,
so,
it does.
So
it was like 10,000 experience points or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's 10,000 per level, and then the rewards you get. The rewards are kind of fascinating, right? Because you get a big bonus for killing the first time you kill a given creature. So there's like an incentive to go find. I'm gonna go find a bunch of different animals and kill them all. Right. But you get what? Best case scenario as a 1st level character, like a couple hundred points for that kill, and you get points for miles traveled, which is a neat idea, but it's not a lot of points. And then
it's really not.
And then so you're looking at a long haul. Now, the interesting thing in 2nd edition, in this edition, is there is an optional. What's marked with a little asterisk as an optional experience point category where you can ritually sacrifice gems and precious jewels to gain experience points, and looks like kind of a backdoor bring experience points for treasure back into the game point. Right. And the fact that it's optional, it seems to be grudging, okay, fine, if you really must,
No, for sure. My impression is that one of the interesting things about Rolemaster is that originally it was designed as a alternate combat system for D&D and RuneQuest, I believe.
Right. Yeah. Do you remember the ads from Dragon Magazine?
I do remember
they would always have the front page ad where they would show, arms law, up your game, or enrich your game with more detail and more excitement,
And that's one of the reasons that we picked it up, or I picked it up, because group had changed a little bit after college.
Mm-hmm.
But I picked it up in post college.
Okay. Interesting.
And we had so where I lived at the time, the I don't think at that point we even had our own game store yet in Salisbury. We had B. Dalton and we had
Okay.
Walton's,
Okay.
but we didn't
Salisbury,
have
Pennsylvania.
Maryland.
Maryland. Okay.
So to do anything, we either had to drive to Dover or Newark in Delaware.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I want to say that the Dover store was called Superior Comics, and I think the Newark store was Days and Nights, even back then, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I know that it is today.
Okay.
So we had to go to one of those stores, and Superior, or the store, the comic store in Dover, had old modules, old games, and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe I picked up Rolemaster. We actually went to Newark, to the store in Newark, and it had been on my I need to play this list for a long time. And it just so happened that the trip coincided with me having cash and the opportunity to buy it, so I did. And it was later that I picked up a copy of. I've been looking for it. I went, find a copy of Mark, but Middle Earth role playing as well.
Okay. That's
and
interesting.
I think
so. You actually found out or went to Middle Earth or got a hold of Middle Earth after Rolemaster, right? Because I actually, now that I think about it, I was aware of Rolemaster, but Middle Earth was the first, at least in my town, Corpus Christi, Texas. We had this on the coast, we had this one hobby store called Leisure Time Hobbies that carried a bunch of gaming stuff, I believe, because the son of the owner was the one who was interested in that. But
that's cool.
But they got Middle Earth role playing, I think, before I ever saw Rolemaster, and so that was kind of a gateway, right, to learning Rolemaster, because it is like a light or a stripped down version of the Rolemaster system from the 80s, right? I'm sorry. So carry on, but you would later on after Rolemaster you had picked up Middle Earth.
Right. And I think so if I'm not, now maybe remembering it's wrong, but I think my pitch to people was like, oh yeah, this is the same game as Middle Earth role playing, so if we want to do that, we could just,
Right.
But what really, and this is a completely non-system reason, but what really got people interested, or at least my group interested, was all the extra material. Because the Rolemaster companions, I don't know if I would say uniquely, but the Rolemaster companions were full of actual stuff you could use.
Yeah. I remember that the character classes in the companion were very interesting and appealing to me. Like the ones in the core book feel pretty dry, right? The fighter, wizard, rogue. All right, there's some oddities like the sorcerer and the astrologer, but there's not much flavor to them other than they use a different set of spell lists, and other than that, they're kind of just alternate D&D characters.
Really, yeah, they are. And there's one, I don't remember which companion it's called, the Macabre or the Macabre.
Mm-hmm.
I even said it wrong, the Macabre. I'm like, who names their character class that? So that was interesting, and the idea of when you're coming from like the Dungeons and Dragons tradition, where at least first edition and I guess second edition paladins really weren't. I mean, they were spellcasters. They were sort of second class clerics.
What? Oh, paladins.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, coming to Rolemaster, they're part of the hybrid spellcaster. I'm like, oh, hybrid spellcaster, that's exciting.
Right.
So there were a lot of terminology and a lot of just different approaches to the game that really kind of appealed, at least on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think where I lost some play people was in once we got into the deep critical tables,
Right.
the chart master portion of Rolemaster. Um, it was fun the first time you got liquefied, but
Right.
I think the second time someone got liquefied, they were like, "Oh,
This is
I
yeah.
don't know if I like this game."
Right. Right. That's funny. Yeah, that was, and the funny thing was that in at least in the culture of gaming, where people talked about Rolemaster, is the charts, the critical hit charts were always held up as either the selling point or the not selling point of the game, right?
Right?
It's
Yes, for sure. That was several times after that I'd be like, "Oh, hey, let's play some uh, Rolemaster," and they're like, "Oh, you mean Chartmaster?" And that was it. That was the end of the conversation.
oh well, yeah. So how long did you actually end up playing the game for? Do you think? Or
So probably from '94 to '99 was the first run,
okay,
and then sporadically after that, here and there, I convince new people
right,
to do one shots.
okay,
The crowd here in Atlanta, there are a couple uh, people around the same age who uh, like it, but we haven't managed to
get together.
get anything going with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it would be a case of I picked up some of the '80s stuff, and then I picked up the Brown book, which I showed on uh, the seminar.
Wait, what?
And
Oh, I don't remember it. What's the Brown book? Is
that's the standard system Rolemaster standard edition or
that's
standard.
yeah, like the RMSS,
Yes.
what they abbreviate it to? Yeah, standard system. Okay,
Yeah.
so was that the first one you ever bought, or
No, my first one was the Arms Law.
the three books, the second edition?
Yes.
Did you happen to have did you have these, or did you have the red one with the Angus McBride covers? Do you remember?
I had the Angus McBride covers.
Yeah, yeah, those are really good covers too. I like
Yeah, they
those
are.
a lot.
Yeah, his artwork is fantastic,
But so
which is another reason I like to play the game.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah, exactly. Um, but so did you ever play the second edition, or did you start playing with the standard system?
no, we played second edition.
Okay.
So that was '94, '95,
Okay.
'96, I think.
Yeah.
And we would play a little bit, and then I would pick up, at one of the used bookstores. I'd pick up another companion, and that would intrigue somebody.
Right.
Oh, I want to play a macabre or whatever, a new character class, and then that would get us going for a little bit longer.
Okay. It
And I've also managed to run, I think I managed to actually run MERP, I would say twice, once for sure, but I believe twice.
okay. So I guess so I'm curious about, I guess, about in your play. So you said you played for about 5 years. It was kind of on and off, and like, did you make a world and all that? Like, campaign law has a pretty opinionated, setting up a campaign section about how you should start, like, top level, and it's got all this information about topography and sociology and things like that, and you start top down, and then you make this world and you populate it with cultures, and then you choose a starting area, and then you set an event in motion in that area, which is, it's kind of, I was rereading and I thought it's kind of interesting, and like it feels on point, although a little abstract. Like, it's all very top level. Like, I'm not gonna give you any suggestions on what to do. Here's how topography works in the real world and how arrange it in your world. Go do
Yeah.
your thing. So it's a little different from. It's different from games where, like Ron's games, for example, are very, regardless of whether they have a specific setting or they don't, they're very keyed into having some elements that go together to create a situation that grabs people. And
Yes.
like, this Rolemaster, the campaign creation ideas in here suggest that you should do that, but it's pretty abstract and hands off. It tells you should do this. Go do it. We'll be over here, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I've been looking at it and figuring out could you actually bootstrap from zero? There's one of those notifications I was complaining about earlier. I'll have to put a black bar over it later.
Right.
Could I actually do this and bootstrap a campaign from the ground up? I tried using the random terrain generation system for a little bit, and it was very tedious. You're supposed to follow this meandering coastline around. I got about 10 or 12 hexes. And I was like, okay, I'm not doing that.
Right.
I'll just draw them out. But
Yeah, right, exactly, yeah.
But
It was, I think it was fascinating to me for that because it was different from both of the main fantasy games I played, the D&D or RuneQuest, in that it really kind of offers. And I think that this is so. I'm not entirely sure how the folks at Iron Crown or the designers felt about Middle Earth, but it's pretty clear, at least at some point, that Rolemaster is designed for that kind of big,
right,
quest style game. It's not necessarily for even like a gritty sword sorcery type thing. I mean, it can be gritty sword sorcery, but it's really kind of at its best, I think, because you spend a lot of time creating a character,
right,
and you spend a lot of time in combats. Once you get to hold them, or once you get to hang on them, fine. But you spend a lot of time in a lot of detail, and it's definitely something that you need to spend that demands or suggests a big setup.
right.
I do think that you could, if people understand that, look, yes, you may spend an hour creating this character, but we may only play for like 2 sessions of 8 hours or 12 hours of this game. So, just as long as you understand that, I think it would be fine. I think that starting, in the kind of a now situation would work just fine.
Okay. And so, what did you end up doing? Like when you started in '95? Like, is it like I was trying to ask before I started talking about this? Did you end up creating like a big giant world and then
Yeah.
zooming in? Yeah. Okay.
I ported one of my many, many. I was not the GM who had one world. A lot of my worlds have the similar themes, but every year, unless I was doing prepackaged setting like the Realms or Gloriantha,
Right.
every year was a new world with.
Okay.
Does it have 2 moons or 3 or 1 or none?
Right. Right.
That kind of thing. So I was very much into world building. So I think that's probably another reason why Rolemaster appealed to me.
Yeah. Yeah. They're definitely the love of just making up like languages, and it's all over the different product. The product, not just the core books, but like their modules and their Middle Earth modules. I think there's one called Ardor by Terry Amthor. I'm not sure if I'm right about that, but it's set in this area of Middle Earth that's not detailed in the books, and he just goes crazy and makes it, like Middle Earth. This is my Middle Earth now. It's like
Right.
there's a whole tarot card deck and all just this stuff that he makes up.
Yeah.
And it's clear that the joy of that is all over those products. Yeah.
Right, and I think that was definitely appealing for me. So that's what I did. But although I don't remember the name of the world, but Rolemaster is where I settled on the idea that this is the Rolemaster world. Um,
Okay.
and so when I run Rolemaster, I run it in this particular world.
Okay.
Um, Especially because I think at that point too, when I finally got it settled, I was using some of the, I would allow things like gnolls and stuff like that, so non-standard races, and so the world was populated with that. I do remember, and this is somewhat infamous, and I don't remember where I got I probably got from the computer game. Um, two of the memorable starts, the characters were in jail with gnolls who were drunk and vomiting. So, so that was the '90s.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you make up a Knoll language or anything?
No, I did not, but that probably I should have done that. The inner Tolkien should have done that. But
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
I didn't make up language. But yeah, there's so much that goes to this system that's attached on to it. I think that is again. I think that's what appealed to me at the time.
Did the players you had over the years respond to that stuff? Like, did they get excited?
That's probably why it didn't really last.
Oh, okay.
Is that no, they were not as excited about all that stuff as I was.
Isn't that always the way?
Yes. Yeah. They, character creation was always fun because, there were so many moving parts to it that it could be, there's a lot of conversation. And that definitely, didn't call it Session Zero at the time. That definitely was something we all did in person together as much as possible. And so it was that was a very good social aspect to, I think, Rolemaster, that group character creation worked really well to get people into the game.
Right.
But it really wasn't enough to sustain them when they could just easily get back to systems that they were more familiar with.
Okay. That's interesting. And so the experience of playing, I wonder did people enjoy interacting with the mechanic? Or you said that, the getting randomly critted was kind of a deal breaker for some people.
Right.
There's a lot of other stuff to interact with in the game, right? There's you can travel and find herbs, and there's a voluminous list of healing herbs by different rarity and climate, and there's special tables for different actions you can take, like the interaction and like the alternative static action table, with your interaction and influence and your disarming traps or picking locks or whatever. I'm curious how much that did that stuff grab people at all, or
not the people I played with at the time. Now it could, I typically ended up being the GM for any new system we had.
Okay.
So some of that was me learning the game. 20 years after, well, not 20 years, 15 years after it had come out. But no, that, I think that the number one thing was going to the understanding that where you really killed something or to really achieve something, you had to get to that critical range.
Right.
Whereas before, they could just needle and dime something to death. Now it was that, you really try to decapitate or chop off somebody's arm, that sort of thing. That's where you get really good results, very interesting results.
Right.
I think that the dividing their skill up in combat, the 25% action and this and that was also a problem. Not that they didn't understand it; it was just a bit clunky from what they were used to.
Right. Yeah, I don't remember much about that. I do remember the dividing your offensive bonus into attack and defense thing, and I
Right.
haven't, and I sort of vaguely did it without much thought to strategy. I think I just felt it was
Right.
cool to feel like I was defending or blocking. I
Yeah.
have read online some long-term role masters players say that they feel or that express the opinion that the system is not really okay because the division, because attacks and blocks, it's not an opposed roll. First one person does their thing, then the other person does their thing. So if the first person just puts all, if you know you're going first and you just put all your stuff in offensive, then the other
Yeah.
person, it's kind of incumbent on them to put all their stuff in defensive, and then it kind of ends up being a wash, or it just expresses whatever. In other words, it's kind of like, oddly enough, Ron's circle of hands, that keep coming back to Ron, but it is his channel.
It's
But his circle of hands game, because you do that offensive defensive split, but because it's a simultaneous opposed roll, you're kind of betting on, there's like this bluff element of
right.
what the other player would do that does seem like it's kind of maybe missing in Rolemaster
Yes.
in terms of the
Right.
comment.
One of the players who I played both. Actually, he introduced me to RuneQuest, so we were a little bit familiar. Like if you go on Strike Rank 7, and like everybody goes on Strike Rank 7 except for the really fast people.
Okay.
Every in RuneQuest, or if you have a big weapon. But most people, at least at the time, went up to Strike Rank 7. So we were kind of used to the idea that, um, what are you doing this round? Well, I'm going to attack and I'm going to parry. Those are my two actions. So the idea for us, the idea of uh, splitting the attack and defense wasn't too bad.
Mm.
But not everybody played that tactically.
Right.
And I think that is probably another thing. People didn't want to really think about their
Yeah.
tactics very much; they just kind of wanted to do it. So that was always a chore. Combat was always a chore,
Right. That's interesting. What about
even though it's really not a chore once you get used to it.
yeah? What about travel? Because it's something that I've often like the idea of actually having a game that expresses these epic journeys where you sort of interact with the landscape and different peoples you meet is appealing. I don't think I've ever achieved it, but there are a couple of games on Adept Play, the RuneQuest game and the Dusters game, where there's a lot of this sort of naturalistic moving across the landscape, and I think that's a kind of a neat element and something that it seems like Rolemaster is going for, especially with the explicit travel experience points, right?
Right.
And I
Right.
wonder, did you try to do it? Did you engage with that a lot, or did you get anywhere with that?
I did. We stayed out of the dungeon. In that, for me, in that case, there was always a lot of movement in
Right.
going places. I put a lot of rivers in this world. There's a lot of river travel, and that was. And again, at the time, I'm just learning the system. So it was interesting to me, but it was hard to keep up with. Keep it interesting
Right.
for
Right.
people.
Yeah.
Now today, I don't think that'd be much of a problem. I feel like I'm smarter and more experienced than I was then.
Right.
So
Right.
that would not be an issue if I read it today. Um, but at the time, it was something that got to be. It was interesting, but it also got to be a lot of work.
Right.
And I probably maybe because I was always so excited to play it, I probably over prepared. I do that anyway.
Okay.
I'm often over prepare, so I over prepare Rolemaster a lot,
Okay.
and I don't blame the system for that. That was just me.
Right, right, right. You mean in terms of just building out locations or things like that, or
Yep. Locations, NPCs,
yeah,
uh,
I,
conflicts,
yeah,
that sort of thing.
that's interesting. I mean, in theory, I mean, again, according to campaign law, that's exactly what you're supposed to do, right? You know, you've got your world with as much detail as you can cram into it based on how much time you can devote, and then like when the players show up and you sort of fit them. Well, it does suggest. Yeah, I mean, the player characters should fit in. You're supposed to talk to them and fit them into the world somewhere, and
Yep.
so, but it's definitely a game that encourages over preparation. I think,
Yeah,
or
that's true. It
a
does.
high degree of preparation. So, so maybe you're just playing it right.
Could be. Could be.
uh, uh, was trying to think of what else I was curious about. I don't know. Did you have any other?
Sure. What were your experience? See, I've never been a player in Rolemaster. I've only ever been a GM. Um, and so, did you have an opportunity to play and run, or one or the other?
No, I think I briefly ran a one shot in high school, which was just fighting some goblins or something, and literally nothing happened other than that. It was just kind of a screwing around with the system, right? So that was sort of nugatory, but is that a word? Anyway, but in college I was a player, and like I said, I don't remember much about the fictional circumstances apart from just certain things about my responses to the game or what I sort of vaguely remember. You know, I remember my characters. I had a bounty hunter first, and I had this picture. He had a hat. I think he was from Companion 1 or Companion 2. You know, the character class was.
You know what? I think I remember that too.
And, but I I honestly don't remember. I think I was hunting a bounty, but I can't remember who the dude was or what we did. I remember a little bit about combat. I do remember that the exciting thing was to get that critical hit, but I don't have any specific memories of that. What I ended up remembering is I ended up changing to a rune master or something, because
Okay.
I suddenly thought that character, like I decided that character was cool because I was flipping through Companion 2. Uh, and
Right.
this bounty hunter was, I think, level 2 and second level, and that was a heroic feat, and level 3 was nowhere in sight, so I was just getting bored. I do remember that, and just trying out new characters seemed like a novelty that was interesting to me,
Yes.
and that's sort of where my memories end, honestly, for the most part. Um, I don't. I have
Right.
I have memories of the people I played with because we played a lot of different games over the couple of
Right.
years of my first half of college. But I don't have a lot of specific memories about that Roll Master game.
Um,
And it could be,
did
I mean, youth and inexperience is a problem too, right?
yeah.
Because I don't think any of us at the time, I don't think any of us had, for example, a lot of experience with travel. Or so how would you make travel interesting if you haven't really done that much traveling, or if you've traveled, you've only gone to a tourist place with your family and you didn't really appreciate the interim. I don't know.
No, that's a good point. Now I had some friends whose parent who uh, was sort of the opposite issue. Well, not opposite problem, but they were well traveled.
Hmm.
And I feel like you make a really good point because it's hard to contextualize how exciting it is to go places if you don't go anyplace,
Right.
or if you haven't been anywhere yet. And that, so how important is travel to someone who, it's an idea, it's exciting. I wanted to travel, still want to travel more.
Yeah.
But it's not the same as having experienced travel, especially if you experience a different culture completely, either within the country or in another country. And but also, but at the same time, I'd also read the Belgariad by this point. I think I'd read the entire Belgariad by then.
Oh, okay.
And so that was probably a pretty big influence at the time as well, from a literary standpoint, because in the Belgariad they travel all over the damn place.
Oh, okay.
And that was pretty influential in my fantasy world design for a good part of the 90s and probably into the 2000s as well.
Yeah.
Not as much Tolkien, and not as much. I'd read a lot of Moorcock and Elric and all that, but I didn't really get into start designing my worlds or the worlds I run that way until the 2000s.
Okay.
So that's probably another reason why Rolemaster appealed, is that you could layer in an epic fantasy, whatever people think of the Belgariad. You could layer that sort of idea in over top of the system, and it works really well.
Right. Okay. Let's see. Is there anything else?
What? Well, okay, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, what level did what was the highest level PC in your campaign? Do you remember?
I think about five as we went.
Okay.
But I probably fudged a little bit to get us that high.
Right.
So yeah, probably about 5th level. And I think that's another thing too. People have a little bit of trouble understanding spell lists in particular. And they're like, "Why do I get this whole list?" I'm like, "Yes, you get the whole list, but you don't get it right now. You have to wait."
Right. Yeah, there's kind of a mini game to learning spells where you assign points and you get a chance to learn them. And I actually think that's kind of a fun part of the game. In terms of, I tried out, when I got these books, I tried out making a couple of little first level characters, and I generally found they felt a little dry, unless they felt pretty well. It's kind of a dry system in terms of making what it gives you to make the character, but like spreading your points out against playing like the spell list like a casino and spreading your points out against around a bunch of them and seeing what you get is kind of the funnest thing I decided about playing it. And I don't think I played it that way. I don't think I made up characters in that way when I was younger. I think I played it safe, and it's a little more dull when you only have like sleep. You have what's it called? Essence ways or whatever that spell list is. Spirit ways. The spell lists are super evocative, fire law.
Yes. And that was one of the things, that was another thing that really drew some players into it. And then they butted up against the rules, and they're like, "Oh, I thought this is very cool, but the system is sort of it bounced off that a little bit."
Yeah.
But I always thought that the magic system was the most interesting part of it, because it's so, and almost every new class they come out with a companion is it's a hybrid spell user. And at first I was a little bit put off by that, because I'm the guy who plays the boring human fighter all the time.
Okay.
I'm like, come on, give me something more. But I realized, like, no, this actually is pretty cool. And So interacting with the magic system, I think, was a lot of fun. Where it really got cool for me is the elemental companion, which
Yeah, okay.
to put up
I think I have a copy, like a reissued copy of that.
the really great thing about that particular one is the way it layered in elemental beliefs. So it starts with, I think I'm remembering this correctly. It starts with the four. Okay, so if this is your universe, you can have four elements. But what if you wanted to add, I think, like blood and void, or light,
Okay.
light and dark, or something? They add two more, and then they add two more until finally the last optional elemental uh, system has all sorts of elements associated with it. I thought that was really well done. I thought it
Okay.
was really interesting because you could really, now obviously you need to make that a big part of your world building.
Hmm.
Uh, but if you wanted to do it that way, you could really
Okay.
play an interesting. I
So
think you
it's
could play an interesting campaign in
okay.
a
It's
universe.
kind of giving you like a pre-made like metaphysical basis or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's too. Along the way, it talks about some of the metaphysics, which I thought was interesting.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and I will say this too: not every companion, but most of the companions, I really enjoyed the writing and some of the little mini stories that they do, or to describe things. I thought were really well done.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
having
that's it.
fiction to help contextualize rules was, I thought they did pretty good job with that. But I also think that has a lot to do with writing. You're doing Rolemaster over here, and you're doing work over
Right.
here. Because I remember a few years ago, I didn't realize how long they held on to the license for Merc.
Right.
They had it almost up, I guess, right up until the movies came out, or
Yeah,
just about
they
till the movies
lost
came
it
out.
just before they were forced into bankruptcy and lost it just
Right.
before the movies came out. Yeah, I read about that. Imagine being in that situation. Wow.
I know.
You know,
Yeah.
but
And it's funny too. I always liked Iron Crown's stuff. I never got to play Space Master though, so I'm not sure how that.
oh yeah,
that
I don't know. Ron has mentioned Space Master. I think he played it and maybe even memorably so. So
yeah,
that would be a thing to ask about if you ever got a chance to ask him.
I will, because that's one of those. I want to say I saw a Space Master advertisement before I saw a Rolemaster advertisement, and it took me a while to like, oh wait, are they the same? Are they the
The
same
same
company?
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah, the
but
Space Master ad was the back page on the back cover on Dragon magazine for quite a while.
right, right. Back in the old days when companies would let each other advertise, and they were like, role playing is a good thing.
Right.
You should play any game.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I guess maybe the last thing I would ask is would you do it today, and what would you do? Like what?
Oh yes, at the drop of a hat.
Okay.
I now I backed the Against the Dark Master.
Oh, that's right. That's kind of the I guess you would call it a retro clone, or maybe not a retro, whatever other word they come with, inspired
No,
by.
I think yeah, inspired by. No, I think it's pretty much a retro clone.
This,
It's, as far as I can tell, it's as legally close as you can get to making a Rolemaster game without calling it a Rolemaster game.
right.
And there are differences. Like I like the way they do experience. There's no more 10,000 experience points.
Okay.
Um, there's the way they do it in the game is at the beginning, and this was I didn't expect this. It's pretty interesting. You get together and you decide as a group, what are we going to give experience for during the campaign? So, will you give it for achieving a certain goal? Will you get it for killing monsters? Will you get it for personal goals? Um, and so you start with 10 experience points, like in Rolemaster. Before you started you were an experienced character.
Right.
Um, and it's like, I think going from first to second is just 10 experience points, but you're only getting like 2 or 3 at most per session. But
Right.
still, achieve 3 or 4 sessions to the next level is far
Right.
from having to get 10,000 more experience.
Yeah. What I was thinking about doing, like if I were to run like Rolemaster or a variation on it, what I was thinking about when I looked at the system like this time around, I thought, what you could do is just hand everyone, you've got your character sheet with all the skills, this list of skills on them. And just hand everyone at the beginning of the game a bunch of check marks and just put them where you want them. And you've got the spell lists and check off, what spell list you want to learn, check off what skills you want to know, and do it however you want it without worrying about, like the development points. Like second edition is very, very strict. This is a digression, but when looking at the old Dragon magazines, this is something that occurred to me years ago when I found my trove of old Dragon magazines in my grandmother's attic, and I also at the time had my actual original copy of Rolemaster.
Okay.
And the ads for character law in Dragon magazine mention as a selling point that there's no arbitrary restrictions on what kind of character, what skills or abilities characters can have. But if you look at the development list, right, okay, you can make a fighter who knows a spell, but like you spend half your points
Right.
to have like a 10% chance of knowing a spell list that you'll never actually be good at. Right, so there's this kind of thing where in the original book where they just want there to be a reason, like they want you to make a D&D character, but they want there to be a reason. Like clearly someone kept asking, but why can't my magic user swing a sword? And like, okay, now there's a reason. Like he can, but he's gonna be terrible at it. So, you figure it out, and you're probably gonna go. I made up a magician and like. It is punishing to do anything other than just make up a dude who knows some spells and can read a scroll,
Yes, right. Right.
But
making a jack of all trades is not
they
that viable.
Do not seem to like it in the original materials.
Mm-hmm.
But so my thought was I felt it would be more just make everyone be a jack of all trades if they wanted to by leveling the playing curve and just throwing out the checks. And then at the end of every session for experience, you just give out one or two more or 3 more check marks. Like you just straight up, it's like more like champions. You just straight up give out the points that you use to build up the character. And then that was sort of, I felt like that would be more something I would do nowadays, and it short circuits around the whole question of, do I use this experience point table, or do I try to fix it, or do I use the sacrificing gems to like boost people? Like you just do a side turn around, all that stuff, and just give out the check marks.
Right. Exactly.
That was my idea.
Especially if you're running something that's going to, 10, at most like 10 or 12 sessions, whatever it's going to be.
Exactly.
There was. I did not play in this game, thankfully. Not to digress this too far, but just in that mentality, in college, a friend of mine or a couple of friends of mine played in a friend's D&D game. And it started in September, and by December, and they were using second edition. So by December, the thief, who only needs 1,200 experience to get to second level,
right?
They played every week, by the way.
Okay.
By December, the thief had finally leveled the second level.
Oh, well. Yeah,
No
yeah,
one else had. No one else had. So that it is a strange mentality, and that I don't really understand what they were thinking, especially because when you're trying to do heroic epic fantasy, you really kind of want to get
to the
your
yeah.
you
I
know
mean,
you,
I mean, like in the the spell list, there's a lot of emphasis on these like high level, how great it is to get to these high levels and get these amazing spells. You know,
yeah.
you're not just boiling liquid anymore. You know, like
Right.
the first fire law spell. That's another thing that I noticed, or I speculate in the spell lists, like the good different spells have like the good spell at different places that kind of feel like they correspond to what level a D&D character would be when he
Yep.
casts that kind of spell, like fireball. Well, a D&D character casts fireball in 5th level. In Rolemaster it's like 7th or 8th, but
Yeah.
but there's this like naturalistic, well, okay, if you get fireball here, then what do you get? There's got to be like a whole school of fire spells. So what's the
Right.
first one? The burning hands? No. How about boil liquid? You know?
Boil liquid.
Yeah.
I'm
Let's
sure
start
it's
really
useful.
small. And so when you do make spellcasters, right, you kind of comb through the spell lists looking for the ones. Which ones are good now? Like, oh,
Right.
sleep, right? How about that?
Yeah.
Sleep is the one that's good when you're first level. Light is not bad, and then of course at second level from light you get shock bolt, which is like your little zappy spell
Yeah.
if you make it to second. So it's interesting how there's this sort of you can see the development from I think they started playing in like 1977, right, with
Yeah.
this campaign that was actually set in Middle Earth, or their version of Middle Earth, and you can kind of see how this second edition Rolemaster document like evolves as a develop, like filling in, trying to naturalistically or logically, maybe is the word they once used. I think Pete Finland once
Yeah.
used, fill in like the steps of D&D and the different things that were perceived as lacunae or that were inconsistencies.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because D&D lacks a lot of utility and stepping stone type of spells.
Right.
Where even at the time RuneQuest, there was you could. I remember using the ignite spell to set somebody's hair on fire. Spirit
Right,
magic.
right.
It's like, what am I going to do with this? Oh, I can set his hair on fire. Oh, okay. You take a
Right.
point of damage to his head. Yeah, no, for sure. But it's also pretty clear they spent a lot of time thinking about this game.
Yeah.
A lot of time.
Yeah.
And they believed in it. And I
Yeah.
think that they still, the people who have picked up Iron Crown, which is, I guess, not much more than a name holder like Facet is now.
Right. Right.
They really still believe in this system.
Mhm.
With harp and space harp and all that kind of thing.
Right. Harp is high adventure role playing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind
And
of
harp light.
yeah, and it's kind of. Is it more based on the Middle Earth role playing system where it's kind of there are less critical hit tables and there are condensed attack
Yeah.
tables, or
There's a lot less there's a lot less charts.
right? And now that I think about it, in Middle Earth, you do kind of, when you're making up the character, you do kind of just get the check marks for your class. You get, here's some ranks, put them where you got. In Middle Earth, I noticed they do just give you these check marks and tell them what categories you can spend them in. So the idea that you could make a warrior who casts spells, but he's just really shitty at it, is gone. You just no, you can't. Or I don't know if there's a work. Well, there might. For all I know, there is a workaround to that. But I
don't know.
it's not very clear that there is. You get 0 spell lists, so don't think about it. Is what it looks like. But
Right.
Who knows? And that's an interesting decision.
Yeah, and I haven't been through all the Against the Dark Master, but it's really condensed. The people who did that really condensed it down to, whereas you used to have this whole list of character classes. It's got 6, I think, in the main book. I don't know if they're planning on more, but just basic stuff like animist, and sorcerer, and warrior, and a few things like that.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I don't think I have merchant in there.
No merchants. Oh well. No macabres or dancers or dervishes.
Yes, nothing like that. Nothing like that. And I give them a lot of props for trying the different things like that. To try to bring an interesting class into a class-based system.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it was kind of a way to a way to fill out, to just get more color into what people were doing. That's interesting.
Right.
Well, did you have any other thoughts or things
the only I always thought it was weird, especially I guess later on, because they didn't the how they break up the different groups of men. Because with the last name Hillman, I was like, oh, Hillmen are they're pretty terrible.
Yeah. Isn't that a Tolkien thing though? Because aren't the common and the high men supposed to be like, there's the Dunedain who were like this ancient race, and then there's just regular people now.
Right, and it's but when you read it, there's no reason to play some common dude. It's it's like great men are great men. Like they get all this cool stuff, and or you could play a dude who lives in the hills, or
but what about
guy who lives in the city.
What about the background options? Oh, that was something. Do you happen to remember this? This wasn't actually, and I've looked at a PDF copy of the first edition Rolemaster, and I don't think background options were in there. It was just like high men or great men and elves were just flat out strictly better than regular people. In the second edition, you've got this set of background options, and common men get more of them. That's their bonus. And I remember when we were playing, you just wanted to spend all your background options rolling on these tables to see if you got different colored eyes that could see invisible or stuff, crazy stuff like that, or magic items.
Yeah.
But the standard background options are actually, that aren't charts or tables to roll on, are actually pretty good. Like, you can just get like a +1 spell adder as an option, and I don't see that there's any reason why you can't just take 5 of them and be able to cast sleep 6 times instead of 1 time.
Nice.
Or you can use all of these. I don't see any reason why you couldn't use all of the +10 skill bonuses on one skill. Like, if you really want to chop someone's head off, you just put them all in one-handed edged weapons, and then you've got a +80 combat bonus instead of a +30 or 40 or whatever you would start with. And so I wonder if that, it strikes me, I wonder what they were thinking when they put that in, and if those were explicitly like a kludge to get around characters feeling lame at first level, or
I wonder if that's the case. Yeah, I wonder if that is the case. Especially because I guess design-wise, you always had to give humans something special,
right?
To sort of, which I never. I remember the first time, and again, this gets also to a little bit of a tangent, but I remember the first time I ran into someone who said, "Oh, why would you ever play a human?" Like, well, I play humans all the time. It never occurred to me to think of it as elves were better; they were just different.
Right.
So to a certain degree, I would play a human character as a kind of a challenge. Yeah, I don't get whatever. But I guess I started with like the basic Mulve D&D. So I played a human, so I'd have more choices of class to be. That would, to me, that was the big,
Right.
and I didn't have to pay 6,000 experience points to get the second level.
Right. Right.
So, but it never really occurred that people would play an elf or a dwarf, make that choice because they were better
mechanically
Yeah.
better. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it was like, oh, I guess that's a good point. And then it becomes sort of a point of pride to play human character.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's
So.
interesting.
But then on the other hand, I've nowadays it's common to sort of balance all the racial or folk heritages out,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's kind of boring. Now you're like, well, why would?
Yeah. I mean, maybe, yeah, right. It's interesting. One option is to think about, I mean, I think we had a seminar about race and having a bunch of different race options. One option is to think about, why is it really necessary to have them mechanically differentiated at all, right? Or do you just choose what your do you just choose what your skills and abilities are, and then your what species, or whether you're an elf or a dwarf, is kind of another colorful thing about your character, right?
Right.
Like, do you need to, like, as they do in Rolemaster, do you really need to sit there and think, well, should elves have a +10 memory or a +5 memory?
Right.
Why is that?
Right.
Why is that a vector for a race to affect? It's kind of an interesting, especially given that, I mean, dwarves, elves, and humans are all very similar. They're basically all human, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
as we understand it, like, they're not bird people or
No. Right. No, they're not bird people. Yeah, that's for sure. Whereas like we're all playing Forge out of Chaos, those races are big differences.
Right.
Big differences.
Right. They are bird people and weasel people or whatever, aren't they?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. My weasel guy, he's really cool, but he's at a real disadvantage in a lot of ways. Now, don't walk up behind him because I got a tail. That's really a good weapon, and he could stiff you out. But like if you're more than 45 feet away, he's like, "I can see what you look like."
Yeah.
Who is that again? Which I really like. I really like that that level of differentiation, because then it does provide you with a lot of interesting color,
right,
and play with.
Yeah, that is neat. Okay, well, anything else about Rolemaster?
No, other than this is one of those things I always tell people: if you've never played it, you have to pick it up, take a look at it.
Yeah.
Especially in its historical context, I think it gets lost a lot. But Rolemaster was very popular, and Merc was very popular.
Mm-hmm.
These were very popular games.
Yeah.
Just look at all the material they made for it. I would definitely, I'd definitely run or play Rolemaster. I'd definitely run or play against the Dark Master.
Okay. Yeah, that's neat.
Because I do enjoy games that are a little more mechanically. Deep, I guess. Probably. I don't want to use crunchy because that's not really the right term.
I understand what you're saying. I can see the appeal. I mean, like, I look through all the tables, and I feel the urge, like, boy, it'd be fun to roll on this table and see what happens. Like the interaction and influence table. Did I piss them off, or
or not? Yeah.
And
I think the design
and a little finely graded. Yeah.
Design gets away from that so much to more abstract and less table rolling. And some of the stuff I'm working on now only uses, you have the same dice you roll to succeed or the ones you use for the result.
Mm-hmm.
But there is an appeal to that kind of depth of interaction with the system.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for the talk, and I mean, keep keep me in mind if you ever if you do decide to run that.
Will do. I really do want to try out against the Dark Master, so I will definitely keep folks updated. And I'll let you know for
Okay.
sure.
Okay. Thanks for talking. Oh, by the
Hey,
way,
no problem.
I
Thanks for the invite.
sure thing.